A teenage black girl walks into court, and the judge laughs in her face. But moments later, the room falls silent because she's not who they think she is. What happens next leaves the entire courtroom speechless, including the judge himself. The courtroom buzzed with quiet murmurs. Dust particles floated in beams of sunlight slicing through the tall windows. Wooden benches creaked beneath the weight of tense bodies. The scent of old paper, floor polish, and something stale lingered in the air. A young black girl stepped forward, clutching a leather folder. Her sneakers squeaked slightly against the polished floor. Eyes turned. Brows rose. A few smirks. A cough echoed through the silence. She wore a navy blazer a size too large and stood with her back straight. The judge glanced up, then leaned back in his chair. He was a gray-haired man with sagging cheeks and tired eyes that sparkled with something meaner. He squinted at her. "Where's your lawyer, young lady?" he asked, voice thick with amusement. She lifted her chin. "I am the attorney," she replied. A pause. Laughter. Not just from the judge. A few snickers from the gallery. He chuckled, slow and sharp, like cracking ice. "You are joking," he said, waving a dismissive hand. She said nothing. Instead, she opened her folder and began to speak. Her voice was calm, measured, clear. Words flowed like a steady river, precise legal terms, case references, dates. The courtroom shifted. The air thickened. Jaws tightened. The judge's smile faltered. He leaned forward. The laughter died. She spoke of precedents, of state laws, of rights violated and procedures ignored. She quoted sections the judge had failed to consider. He cleared his throat, but she did not stop. She had memorized every detail. She was unstoppable. His fingers tapped against the bench. A small twitch at his temple. He glanced to the court clerk, then back to her. She closed her folder. Silence. Then a slow clap. From the back row, a woman in a tailored suit stood. The crowd turned. She was from the state bar, sent to observe the trial. The judge paled. He recognized her. The young attorney turned. She smiled, not with arrogance, but with quiet power. The judge swallowed hard. His gavel trembled slightly in his grip. She stepped closer to the bench. "The court," she said, "is not your stage for mockery." He opened his mouth, but the words did not come. The courtroom watched. No one laughed now. The girl's voice had become thunder. She reminded them all. Justice does not care for prejudice, nor age, nor race, only truth. And she was its sharpest blade. The judge's knuckles whitened around the gavel. His robe suddenly felt too warm. Sweat gathered at the edge of his brow. He looked down at the papers before him. Blank lines blurred beneath his eyes. The silence pressed in, heavier than before. The woman from the state bar stepped forward. Her heels clicked with deliberate rhythm across the marble. She handed him a sealed envelope. His hand trembled as he took it. "An internal review has already begun," she said firmly. The words struck like a gavel themselves. Gasps fluttered through the courtroom. Whispers rushed like wind through dry grass. The judge stared at the seal. Red wax, marked with the crest of authority he no longer controlled. He looked up. His eyes met the young attorney's again. But this time, no condescension, only fear. She turned without a word, walked past the gallery, past the stunned bailiff, past the man who once laughed at her presence. The doors opened with a soft creak. Light poured in, golden and sharp. She did not pause. She did not look back. She had come to speak truth, and she had shattered a legacy of arrogance in its own temple. Outside, the sun warmed her face. Birdsong floated through the air. The courthouse behind her stood still, like a monument to the past. But she was already walking toward the future. Reporters surged forward as she stepped onto the courthouse steps. Microphones reached like eager hands. Cameras flashed, their shutters clicking like nervous insects. "Who are you?" one asked breathlessly. "Where did you study law?" shouted another. She paused. The noise swirled around her, but her eyes found one young girl at the edge of the crowd. clutching a worn backpack, watching with wide eyes. Hope reflected in that gaze. The kind that had no voice, but all the power in the world. She walked toward the girl, kneeled beside her. "What is your name?" she asked gently. "Layla," the girl whispered. "Do you want to be a lawyer?" The girl nodded just once. She smiled and reached into her bag, pulled out a card. "Call me when you are ready." The girl took it as if it were gold. The crowd fell quiet for a moment. The cameras kept flashing. But the moment was no longer about spectacle. It was about change. She stood again, taller than before. Not in height, but in legacy. Behind her, the courthouse doors creaked open once more. The judge stepped out, his face pale, the envelope still in his hand. But now, the power was no longer his to wield. He looked at the reporters, then at her. But she had already turned away. The story had shifted, and the gavel once used to silence, now echoed with the sound of a new voice rising. Footsteps fell into rhythm behind her. Some were hesitant, others bold. Law students, interns, even seasoned lawyers followed her down the steps. They did not speak. They did not need to. The message had already been delivered. The city felt different now, brighter, sharper, like it had been waiting for this moment to wake up. She walked past stone columns, each one casting long shadows. Shadows that used to stretch over voices like hers. But not anymore. A mural caught her eye on the nearby wall. It showed a blindfolded Lady Justice, but someone had painted over her mouth. Silenced. She stared at it for a moment, then reached into her bag again, pulled out a black marker, stepped forward, and drew a line through the gag. Freed her. The people watching erupted in applause. Not loud, but certain, like the cracking of old chains. She turned and kept walking. The crowd parted before her, not out of fear, but respect. And behind her, whispers grew louder, not of doubt, but of inspiration. They said her name now like a promise, a warning, a legend in the making. And deep inside the courthouse, the judge sat alone, staring at the seal he once wore like armor. But today it felt like a mirror. And he did not like what he saw. The judge sank into his chair. The courtroom was empty now. The silence was no longer peaceful. It was accusing. Every polished surface reflected back the truth. The bench no longer felt like a throne. It felt like a witness stand. And he was the one on trial now. He reached for his glass of water. His hand shook. The glass clinked against the desk. A single drop spilled, trailing down the wood like a tear. He looked toward the gallery. He could still hear the echo of her voice. Firm, unapologetic, undeniable. The memory struck harder than any verdict. It stripped away years of comfort, privilege, assumption. He opened the envelope. Inside was a letter. Short, precise, official. It outlined a formal investigation, multiple complaints, a history of bias buried under procedural smoke. And now, exposed. The gavel on his desk sat silent, heavy, meaningless, because justice, real justice, had already spoken. Outside, the city carried on, but something fundamental had shifted. The courtroom would open again tomorrow. New faces, new stories. But the stain of today would remain, not as shame, but as memory, a mark carved deep into the stone of a system, a reminder that even in the quiet halls of power, truth waits, and when it walks in, no one can laugh it away. Weeks passed, but the echo of that day never faded. The young attorney's name began to circulate through legal circles, not as a novelty, but as a force. She took on more cases. Defended the unheard, the unseen. She walked into courtrooms that once turned her away, and walked out with justice in hand. Her presence became legend in city halls and law schools alike. Students studied her arguments. Judges re-examined their own rulings. Change, once a distant idea, now had a face. And a voice. One that never wavered. One that had been mocked, then feared, now respected. The young girl, Layla, kept a card in her wallet. Read it every night like a promise. Someday, she would stand in that courtroom too. Not just as a witness to history, but as its next chapter. And the judge. He never returned to that bench. His robe was folded away. His silence, louder than any verdict he had ever given. The building remained the same. Stone columns, high ceilings. But the energy inside had changed. Because one voice, brave and unwavering, had reminded them all of what the law was meant to protect. Not power, not pride, but truth. And now, that truth walked in heels, in sneakers, in silence, in strength. It walked into every courtroom with a lesson that no prejudice can outlast the persistence of justice, and no laughter can drown out the voice of the fearless.